Welcome to the Trombone Show podcast, which I do very occasionally these days, basically. And to kind of start off, really, it says that you're originally from Southern California. Is that where you were born and from, really?
Yeah, I was born in California, kind of moved all over California until I finally ended up getting out of there and joining the military. But yeah, I spent the first half of my life in California.
Knowing that you're a trombone player, what got you into music, and what was the first instrument you played?
In junior high, everybody had to take a music class where you had to learn how to play recorder. yeah, that.
Bullshit.
Yeah, my parents probably hated that more than they hated me playing trombone. Then in that class, we got the opportunity to try out other instruments, and it ended up becoming something I was very interested in. I started out being a baritone player. And so I did that in junior high and into my freshman year in high school. Before then, I ended up becoming a trombonist. My band director handed me an Earl Williams trombone that had been donated to the school.
Does anyone know what Earl Williams is? Is that even a legitimate company, or are they sus or something like that? I don't know.
Earl Williams was a trombone maker in LA back in I think the 1920s through the 1940s.
Wow.
Very, very good instruments. Very, very rare and in high demand now.
So very good, but they only lasted 20 years. So are they even legitimate in that regard?
He may have died. I don't know the full history of Earl Williams, but it was probably one of the best small trombones to learn how to play trombone on.
Wow.
And yeah, my band director handed me this horn and said, hey, we need more trombone players. Today's the last day of school before Christmas break. When you get back in 3 weeks, you better know how to play it. And that's how I ended up becoming a trombonist.
In that winter break, your band director assigns you extra homework. What clicks about the trombone over the baritone?
It seemed pretty natural. I mean, I had a fingering chart, and that was about it.
A fingering chart. It's a slide position chart, actually. But yeah,
well, you know what I mean. So I got that and compared it to the baritone fingering chart. That's why I used the term fingering chart.
Yeah.
And just used that as my basis. And because I could already play in bass clef, I could already read music, and I understood then the correlation between fingerings and slide positions. It all came, pretty naturally, and then it was just a matter of becoming proficient at moving the slide.
Yeah.
So when I came back after the break, I wasn't going to be winning any solo competitions, but I had the fundamentals of the instrument down, and I was able to get in there and play some of the simpler music that we were able to do. And I just kind of worked from there just to get better as fast as I could.
I mean, granted, baritone and trombone are kind of similar instruments. I mean, mouthpiece wise, it's mostly similar. The biggest difference is just how you blow. I mean, the baritone is a conical instrument, and the trombone is just a tube.
The sound quality is different, and the approach to sound quality is different. Of course, me as a young high school student didn't really understand any of those differences until much later on in my trombone playing. But I just really approached it from, the music's the same. This fingering means this position, and just go for it. And that's really just how I got my start.
Do you end up switching to trombone as that you're being your main instrument, or do you say, hey, I'm a trombone player and a baritone player at the same time, or do you just ditch euphonium altogether?
I became a trombonist. That was the only instrument that I played. I mean, there were some times later on when I went back to it when it was needed for whatever purpose in the ensembles I was in. So I didn't lose those fundamental skills, but I became a trombonist as my primary instrument.
Awesome. So when it comes time to decide what you want to do for college, I would have predicted that you became a music major in college, but it says here that you enrolled in the Air Force instead.
So
explain that a little bit. That detour of you got trombone, wait, we're Air Force. What are you talking?
I actually had been accepted to Berkeley. And
Berkeley what?
Berkeley College of Music.
Great, cool.
And so I was supposed to go to Berkeley and study with Phil Wilson. And I didn't know the first thing about financial aid, student loans, any of that.
So they made you pay $90 million for tuition or something like that, or
Well, tuition then in 1994, I think, was about 12,000 a semester. We were, a fairly low income family, so it
Mhm.
wasn't going to happen.
Mhm.
And so I ended up in community college at Riverside City College in
Okay.
Riverside, California, with
Mhm.
Roger Rickson, who actually wrote the biography of Frederick Fennell. They were best friends, and he knew Stan Kenton and all the LA jazz players, and he was just a phenomenal guy. And so I was kind of working through the motions in community college, but was running out of money, was looking at the benefit of the GI Bill, which would help pay for school. And I had a recruiter said, "Oh, sure, we can get you into one of the Air Force bands. We can do that, no problem." And me being young and stupid, I didn't know how the military band programs work. I didn't know you needed to go in with a degree in music already,
Mm.
that there was audition requirements and all these sorts of things. So he's like, "Sure, I can make this happen for you." And so I joined up in the Air Force, and of course he says, "Oh well, we need to have a backup plan for you, in case you don't get accepted to one of the bands." And so that backup plan was to be a signals intelligence analyst. And anybody who's been in the military will tell you the one thing you don't want to do is draw attention to yourself in basic training. And so I roll up to basic training with a trombone strapped on my back.
What?
And became a target pretty much immediately.
What's
Uh,
that behind your back? Is that a trumpet?
right, and you get the usual stuff, play Freebird and all that. It's like, sorry,
Oh
wrong
yeah.
instrument. But so I went through basic training. I ended up becoming a signals intelligence analyst, and actually I had an opportunity in basic training to meet with a trombonist from the Air Force Band of the West,
Wow.
and she decided to take the time to explain to me how it really worked.
So how'd
And
it
I
work?
was, that you needed to have a degree in instrumental performance, that there were auditions that you had to go through. They had to have an opening for it. We took the
None of which you
opportunity.
had.
Oh no, not at all. I mean,
But
I
you
had
had, but did you have the skills to do it despite that, or not at all?
Well, I had played professionally to an extent in musical theater settings in Southern California before I joined the Air Force. But I certainly would argue that while I excelled as a trombonist, I wasn't in a position to be competitive for a position in one of the military bands. And
Mm.
so I ended up being a signals intelligence analyst at the National Security Agency and the Air Intelligence Agency. And my horn sat in its case in a closet for several years.
Wow.
And so, when I ended up going to Texas A&M University after I got out of the military,
Hmm.
and I was on a commissioning program on a ROTC contract. And this was in the days of don't ask, don't tell. They found out. I lost my contract. It was a big deal. So I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life next. Texas A&M doesn't or did not have a music program at that time. They still don't have a music major. All they do have a more robust trombone program with Dr. David Wilborn, who's absolutely amazing. But it was a fledgling program when I was there. And so I ended up becoming a political science major since I was there, and graduated, moved to Houston, and got into government service.
Let's back up to the don't ask, don't tell thing. What does it mean? The don't ask, don't tell thing. I mean, I heard about it when I was many years ago. I was like,
Right.
what the fuck does that mean?
Well, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was the ban on gays in the military. Don't ask meant that they weren't technically supposed to ask you, and you weren't supposed to tell them.
Hey,
and if
are you gay? If no, get out. Oh,
Right.
Oh, I'm not supposed to ask. You're in. I don't.
Right.
I mean, was that what it was basically? That was an Obama,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Or
Well, Obama signed the repeal of Don't Ask,
oh,
Don't
okay,
Tell. He signed the
okay.
repeal of it. Bill Clinton signed it into law. Now, before then, there was just an outright ban. They could ask you, they could investigate you, they could go on witch hunts. And that started when Franklin Roosevelt was the Secretary of the Navy. The really heavy, witch hunts. And so it made it easier to stay quiet and stay in the shadows when Don't Ask, Don't Tell came into play. But I'll give you an example of where it really had a detrimental impact on a lot of folks. I got visited by an Office of Special Investigations agent one day, and they wanted me to be an undercover informant for some drug activity and other things that were going on with other members of the Air Force.
What drugs were common back then in the Air Force?
This particular case involved cocaine.
Mm.
So, I mean, not light stuff. I said, I really don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to get drug into any kind of thing that's going to be dangerous and be something that's kind of crazy for me in my life. I want to just do my work and stay out of it. And they said, well, we'd really hate to have to go tell your commander where it is you go every Saturday night and what kind of clubs you like to go to, because there was a gay bar in town in San Antonio that I would go to, and it actually wasn't on the blacklist, but they had undercover agents at the bars, and so
Wow.
if they saw that you were there, they would use that as leverage to try to make you inform or do other things. Just on this side of blackmail, sometimes things could get pretty tough. And I saw other people really go through a much worse scenario than I did. I mean, people who got prosecuted on made up charges because they just wanted rid of them. And it depended largely on who your commander was, what kind of a military service member you were. I had a commander who he figured it out. I mean, he knew what time it was with me. He knew, he had figured it out. And he called me in, had a one-on-one discussion with me and said, look, if you have a problem with anybody, come tell me and I'll take care of it. And so he helped me kind of keep things quiet. And when I ended up losing my contract, the ROTC detachment commander sat me down and he said, look, I can't even begin to imagine what you're going through and how difficult this must be for you, but the law is the law. And so I have to conduct an investigation. He said, are you gay? I said, yes. And he said, okay, the investigation's done. And he wasn't going to go through my whole life and talk to people I know and go through this long thing.
I'm not laughing because, you get, that's so hilarious. That's how you get fired. I'm like, no, that's hilarious because that's such bullshit. Like, that's it. You're done. I'm like, that's insane. I mean, honestly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. But I appreciate that he didn't want to drag me through a big ordeal. He could have, but he chose not to. And I was a student at A&M. I had the opportunity to figure out what else I wanted to do with my life in those 4 years that I was there. So if there was any place I could be to reevaluate what direction my life and my career was heading, that was one of the better places to be. It's not like I was, in South Korea at Osan and then just got sent back stateside and had to figure out my whole life from scratch all at the drop of a hat. I was very lucky in that regard.
When did you realize, hey, I might not be straight, I'm gay? I mean, at what point in your life did you maybe start to realize that, and what point did you start to maybe share that news with other people, or was it kind of a thing you kept close to yourself for the whole time?
I probably knew when I was 5. I think.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't, when I was 5, I didn't understand what gay was. I didn't know that there was a name for it or anything. I just like guys. Yeah, I mean, I had figured it out, and later on, about the time I was, maybe 12, 13, I started to understand what gay was, and I was like, oh, that's what this is. That's what this aspect of my life is. And by that,
do you mean, what people stereotype as gay people, or versus, this is the name for what they call guys like guys, versus what Hollywood stereotypes gays to be in the LGBTQ scene or anything like that, you know what I mean? Or
it was that's the description of what I am. That's what this thing about me that's different, that's what it is. And I think I probably really knew that that's 100% who I was about the time I was 14. I think my mom actually asked me if I was when I was 14.
Are you gay? Yep.
Yeah, and she asked me, and I was like, no, because you never know how somebody in your family is going to react,
yes.
I knew that it was this dangerous thing for people to know, and I ended up coming out when I was 16. I just decided that I was ready to do that, and I talked to some friends at school, and then it kind of blew wide open at school, and I was like, well, crap, I need to get ahead of this, and because I didn't want my family to find out from somebody other than me.
Right, right.
And so when I was 16, I was in the Tournament of Roses honor band
Wow,
for
nice.
the Rose Parade, and so we had the banquet the day after the parade, and so some people talked about me being like interested in somebody who was in the band.
And this okay, this Rose, what is this band thing?
The Tournament of Roses honor band.
And this is people from around the country randomly selected. Hey, you got audition. Or is this like the same high school that performed as? I'm because I'm scared about that part.
The Pasadena City College marching band is technically the host band for the Tournament of Roses parade, and they have auditions for really any student who wants to come participate and sit for an audition can come and audition. And if you get selected, you've got to show up for practices every weekend for like 2 months and march for miles and miles and miles to get ready for it.
Okay.
But it's an honor band, just like a lot of other honor bands around the country.
So you're playing this band with people from around the country, maybe around the state of California, who knows really, and you're talking about the last banquet and already they're talking about, oh, this guy likes gay, this guy likes guys. And I'm like, how did they find out? Considering they might have only been together for a month, or a few weeks, and like, I mean. That was the thing I wanted to kind of distinguish. As opposed to like, oh, it's the same high school. Oh, it must have been your buddies who already knew what they knew from weeks back.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends who were in the band because it was mostly Southern California band students.
Not no one from the East Coast where it's like, oh, I want to be in the Rose Bowl Parade. I don't know.
Right, and so a lot of us knew each other, and some people started talking about me liking somebody, not specifically who, but they talked about it in front of my mother, who was there with me.
And did your mother already knew by the time, or no, or
she didn't? And so we were driving back home, and she was like, "So who is it you like? And who is it you like? Who is it you like? Who is it you like?" And she would not leave me alone. And so finally, I was just like, "Okay, fine, Mom, Jimmy." And this the guy's name.
Were you just like, oh, it's Susan from across the hallway? It's no big deal. I'm normal. Don't worry about me. And then maybe she
right. It was this guy named Jimmy, and she was like, "Oh, are you gay?" And I said, "Yes." And then I fell apart. I totally lost it, just because the power and the emotion of that moment of finally letting that off my chest.
And what was your family's reaction? I mean, your mom, your other family members.
They were like, "Okay."
That sounds like California to me because
yeah.
I mean, did any part of you start to learn that, hey, I'm gay, my family's great with it, California is a safe haven for LGBTQ communities. Oh, here's Texas, a red state. Don't go there, you'll die. I'm gonna go there anyway. Like, what was the think behind that?
I never really thought about it. Now I knew once I ended up back in the military, I was back in the closet. Like I couldn't tell anybody. There was a handful of very close friends who knew. But by and large, all my friends weren't even in the military because I couldn't take the risk of people finding out. I went to A&M. I didn't know anything about Texas A&M at all before I went there. And I was in the Corps of Cadets. At the time, A&M had been ranked as the third least LGBT friendly.
They ranked that shit?
The Princeton Review, I think it was the Princeton Review, actually ranked that at that point.
Wow.
And I didn't know, and I was in the closet, but then the whole thing, I lost my contract, and that's a situation where you kind of have to let people know because rumors are always worse than the truth. And so I lost my contract. I stayed in the Corps of Cadets. There's a whole bunch of shit that went down. My life was absolutely crazy for a while, and then I left the Corps, and then I ended up coming back and finished out my time in the Corps of Cadets.
What changed?
That was the only reason why I was at A&M. And if I wasn't going to be in the Corps of Cadets, I might as well just go to another school. And I just didn't want to do that. I had actually been a cadet.
Go back to California. There's this gay-friendly school out there. I mean, go back to Texas. I'm gonna.
I didn't. That was the hard part. Is I didn't know what would happen if I went back to California. And my fear was that if I moved back with my parents without a real plan for what I was going to do, that my life would just stall out. and I would just trudge through life, not getting anywhere, and work for my dad's concrete company, um, which I did when I was 14. I didn't want to get back into that industry, and I had been a cadet at the Air Force Academy,
Hmm.
and I left there after a year because it was not the right place, locked up on the side of a mountain to kind of figure out who you were.
Yeah, that's
To be a gay person, everybody knows everybody else's business, and I didn't feel like it was a safe place for me. Not safe from other people, but it was really really tough for me to not at least be able to get away and talk to people about who I was, to go just live authentically, even if it was for a day or two at a time.
mm,
You just can't do that way, and it's tough. And I will be the first person to say that a lot of people can do that, and
I see.
I was not one of them.
Mm.
As much as I hate to say that, I just wasn't one of them. And I honestly was afraid that if I had stayed at the Air Force Academy, I probably wouldn't have survived. I stayed at A&M, I stayed in the Corps, and I did the things that were important to me. And then I was able to get away every weekend. I came to Houston and I went to the clubs and I had met friends and I hung out with them, and I ended up
Good.
meeting
That's good.
the man who would become my husband at
Oh,
a
nice,
club
nice.
in Houston. And so after I was done at A&M, I moved to Houston so that we could live together, and just ended up working in public service. And we've been together for 20 years now. So I like to think that it turned out all right.
Well, congratulations, because 20 years is a damn good long relationship you got there with your buddy there. So in the Air Force, quick question: did you ever fly any planes or Air Force like
No,
F-18s or anything
I
like that?
I was enlisted. I had my opportunity to fly on Air Force aircraft. Now, when I was at the academy, I got to fly gliders.
Mm,
I was up there with a training instructor. These gliders have engines to take off, but then once you get up there, they just shut it down, and then I'm in control of the aircraft. And that was the extent of my flying experience, other than being a passenger, in the back of a C-130 or a C-17.
oh yeah,
Um,
that sounds pretty cool. Honestly, I mean, I was wondering like how they even get to sit in that back seat gunning down terrorists in the Middle East or something like that. I don't know. You know what I
I well,
mean?
I got to sit on a bench made out of cargo straps. I mean, it is not the most glorious first class experience around, and it's certainly not the most comfortable.
Mm. It says you're involved in public works and played trauma and casualty. Do you want to explain that part of that really, or like how you got involved in public works?
I was unemployed for a while. I was actually in the funeral industry for a while.
Well, you celebrating people's deaths or something, or what?
No, I actually I most of my time I spent transporting human remains and going to places and picking them up. Funeral or other funeral homes, nursing homes, houses, hospitals, the medical examiner's office.
Wow.
Um, but that was not what my life's work wanted to be.
Who wants to be a part of dead people? I mean, what the heck?
It's not that bad, I promise.
Oh, really?
It's not for everybody, but
Should I do it? Just be a
it's
dead person.
it can be very gratifying being there for families in their time of need,
Hmm.
and that's what I really liked about it. But I was just putting out resumes, and I had a degree in political science, and I had really wanted to be in public service ultimately. I mean, after having been in the military, I wanted to be in civilian public service. And so I ended up getting an entry level job at the city of Houston, working in public works as an administrative associate. And I have worked there for almost 18 years now. I'm currently a division manager. I work on contract compliance. I've previously been the human resources liaison for the department, and the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Accommodations coordinator. I actually now I do independent consulting on ADA issues and HR for small nonprofit organizations and arts organizations. And I've been pretty successful in being a public servant. But in 2007, I was like, I really I miss playing trombone, and I hadn't played trombone to any significant length of time since I was a student at A&M. And that was just playing in one of the university bands. So I found the Houston Pride Band. I saw them in the Houston Pride Parade, and I was like,
Like, did you make the Houston Pride, or did you just like, hey, here's a band, join it? It's gay people. I don't know.
yeah. They marched in the Houston Pride Parade. I didn't know that there was a band. in the community. And so I signed up and went and played with them, and I've been playing. I'm now in my 15th season with them. For a long time, it was I picked up my horn a couple hours a week for rehearsal, and that was it. Until the last few years, I started getting much more serious about it again. But yeah, I mean, the Houston Pride Band is part of the Pride Bands Alliance. I think there's like 36 or 38 member bands across the country and across the globe. So, people in a lot of major cities, they can look up the Pride Bands Alliance, and they can find a good welcoming band. They don't even have to be LGBTQ to play. It's just they're mostly non-audition community bands that just get together to have a good time and
What
play
if it
good
was
music.
all straight people and there was like, here's a pride band. There's no gay people. Like, wait, why is it called the Bride Band? There's no gay people.
Well, that'd be a little bit weird, but I can safely say that is not the case in the member bands of the Pride Bands Alliance.
Were it not for the Houston Pride Band, would you not be taking trombone seriously these days?
Probably not. Absent an opportunity to play, the interest just had waned because I hadn't been playing for such a long period of time.
In the years that have since passed since you started playing for the Houston Pride Band, how has the maybe reintroduction to starting to take music as a profession gone by really?
It was a combination of a lot of different things. I think the primary impetus, though, is I had some life-changing events in 2019 that really drove home that life is too short.
What happened?
Um, I had been estranged from my biological father for about 20 years, and I had been searching for him, but I was
Wow.
always just kind of one step behind him. And then in July of 2019, my sister got a call from the Riverside County Coroner's Office that he had died.
Wow.
And so we had to fly out to California and deal with that as his next of kin. And it was an interesting and difficult experience to go through. And then
So you're looking for your dad, and then the government's like, "Oh, we already know where he was. Oh, by the way, he died. He's dead. Here's the next. I mean, here's your bad news. I mean, couldn't you just went out to the government and be like, "Hey, where's my dad?" And he was like, "Oh, he's gonna die. That's where he is." I mean,
well, it's not that simple.
I mean, yeah.
He had been homeless for a period of time,
Wow.
and he was in some housing that had been provided by a church. So it's not really a situation where the government knew where he was.
Until he died.
Right. When a 911 call comes in and they need to figure out what to do with somebody who's passed away, they start looking for next of kin, and I'm pretty easy to find. We had to go through that. And then 3 months later, my stepdad, who was my dad, he had been with me for most of my life, he lost his battle with Alzheimer's. It was kind of a dark time for me. And I reevaluated a lot of things and said, I want to get back to the things that are really, truly important to me. And music was something that was very, very important to me. And it was what I wanted to do with my life until I got kind of derailed to this whole other business. And it started out with me really just wanting to be a better trombone player and saying, hey, I want to be able to get back to doing shows or doing something that really gives me an opportunity to make music that other people can enjoy, and maybe I can make a little money off of it and just be much more satisfied playing a broader depth of literature other than just what we were doing in the Pride Band. Not that there's anything wrong with what they're doing. I just wanted more than they could give me. I looked at just taking lessons, and community college is the best deal in town. And that turned into me being a music major. I was able to make it work with my schedule. Online classes now for theory and ear training are fantastic. It's a really good opportunity for people who might not be able to attend classes in person. And I thought to myself, well, I don't lose anything by taking these extra classes. In fact, it will make me a lot better at what I do. It will make me a better musician. It'll make me a better arranger. It's all around, a lot of good, strong benefits. And so I dove right back into that and started taking trombone lessons, and having a great time with it. I actually have just completed 2 years of it, but I still have class piano to take, too much fun there. That's the class I didn't want to take, but I've got to take it. And so next year it's class piano 3, class piano 4, but I'm going to continue taking trombone lessons. And I'm also taking composition lessons so that I can broaden my skills as a musician, and get into both writing and make myself a better arranger. It has turned into a really, really good experience. And I've worked hard, and now it's actually a situation where I'm playing in 2 orchestras.
Wow.
Which
Nice.
was a great time. I've done some paid gigs again. I've got some arrangements that are published. I'm working on one that's going to be published here soon.
A study of your own students, do you give them lessons to, or not yet, or?
Not yet. I think I need to get a little farther along, and then maybe look at younger students, community college students who need to be brought up to a particular level. Not every community college student is somebody like me who's been playing for 30 years. There are folks who've been playing for a year or two, and they're trying to get themselves up to a level where they are able to transfer to a 4-year school.
Yeah.
And so I've thought about that. Not quite sure where I want to go in that regard. At some point, I'd like to look at being able to teach at Houston Community College. I mean, that's something my trombone instructor and I have talked about getting to that point where I can come back and I can teach.
Doesn't that require a doctoral degree or something like that, or?
At the community college level, it requires a master's degree. Now, I already have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. I will get an associate's degree in music. I may have an opportunity to roll right into a master's degree, depending on a number of factors that we have yet to explore. In Texas, there are some schools that will not grant you a bachelor's degree if you already have one. So they require that you go directly into a master's program. So I'm looking at those opportunities. But one degree at a time. I'm going to get through my associates here at the end of this next academic year and see where to go from there.
I was chatting with Tyler Bullion sometime last year. There's like a caliber of professorship that requires a doctoral degree. People might look at your paper and be like, well, you got a master's, you got a doctoral person's better. Does that ever cross your mind, really?
Alan Barnhill is the trombone professor at Rice University, and I don't think he has a doctorate. In Texas, when you're at 4-year schools, they have a lot more latitude, and particularly private universities like Rice, University of St. Thomas, and others, where they'll actually hire instrumental professors who may not even have a degree.
What the hell?
Because they're playing at such a high level.
Yeah.
That there is no question about what they can do. And it's that thing where the degree may not necessarily matter as long as you can play, which, let's face it, out in the real world, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have if you can't play the lick. If you can't go play a gig, nobody cares where you went to school. They just care that you can play.
That's
now,
interesting.
Community colleges in particular, it is a state law requirement that they must have a master's degree. Period.
Nice.
They don't have that latitude that 4-year universities do. And so, in my case, all they care about is that I have a master's in music if I wanted to teach music students. Like right now, I could go teach government all day long at any community college in the state of Texas because I have a master of public administration. That's all they care about.
But you don't want to do that. You want to teach trombone. You want to play the instrument. I mean, other than that, bullshit. If you want to put it that way, I don't know.
it's kind of complicated in some regards. The way things are set up in the higher educational system in Texas. But for example, if I wanted to go teach trombone at a community college, I could have a master's degree in music education or composition or musicology, music therapy. It doesn't even have to be a performance degree. All they care is that you've checked that box that you have a master's degree.
Nice.
That's all that matters.
You're in Texas. You are a gay trombonist. We all know that. But we also know that Texas is a very red state. I mean, I was watching Cheer, and in that show Cheer, they were there was this like classroom scene where it was like, okay, so what do you know about politics in Texas? Well, anti-abortion, it's pro-life, it's conservative, it's anti-immigration, yada yada, conservative. It all kind of grinds against the whole LGBTQ thing a little bit. Do you have to navigate obstacles, or do you find solace in like these organizations that accept LGBTQ trauma, as like the Houston Pride Bar?
From a broader perspective, I mean, the Texas legislature and the governor, the Republican
Ted Cruz,
right? The Republican elected leadership in Texas is very actively and openly hostile toward the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
They would rather we not exist. I mean, that is just a simple fact of it. My husband actually happens to be the field director for Equality Texas, our statewide equality organization. Nice. And, he sees the worst of it up close. And even in my own situation, a number of years ago, before it was states had to issue marriage licenses, they had to recognize marriages that were conducted out of state. I got married in Washington, D.C. The city of Houston government began extending benefits, medical, dental, vision, those kind of things, to same sex spouses of
Nice.
city employees. And the city of Houston got sued. And I
By
ended
whom?
up by a bunch of right wing anti LGBT activists who
Yeah.
I'm not going to dignify by saying who they are. And I ended up being an intervening defendant in
Wow.
that case. And
Nice.
so there was a federal lawsuit. And so I was personally involved in those struggles. It's frustrating and it makes you angry. You look at this last legislative session when our state government declared war on trans children.
What?
I mean, it's
What the
really
hell?
sick and disgusting. And calls to the Trevor Project went up like 40%. And actually, that number, I don't know if that's correct. It may be higher than that. That's just existing in Texas. That's not trying to be a musician in the state of Texas. I mean,
Right.
thankfully, I think we all recognize that there's a lot of LGBTQ people in the music industry.
If Texas legislator is a bitch to gay people, why not just move to California? Or Illinois? Or Washington, D.C.? Or any other state that's not gonna fucking kill you for being gay or anything like that, you know?
I wish I had an easy answer for you or a good answer for you. And there are a lot of people I know who have left the state. They've gone to more welcoming places. I have a life here. I have a career here. I mean,
I can have a career there. No,
Yeah, but-
no anti-gay bullshit, and everyone's happily ever after, you know?
Again, I wish I had a simpler answer for you. I've worked for the city of Houston for almost 18 years. There are retirement benefits involved in that and certain things. If I don't make it at least to 2025, it's going to cost me six figures in retirement benefits over the course of my retirement. I mean,
Yikes.
it's not just as simple as packing my shit up and leaving and going somewhere else. I mean, when we talk about having roots, I mean, yeah, we've got roots. I own property. I have a career. I have, these relationships with orchestras that I play in. I have family. I have friends. I have really built a life. I've lived in Texas longer than I've ever lived in California at this point. That's an individual decision that a lot of folks make. I've thought about it, but it isn't the right choice for me, at least not now, not at this stage of my life. And to another extent, I can't be part of the fight to make a difference. My husband can't be a part of the fight to make a difference without being here. If you tuck tail and give up and run, you've given up. You've ceded all that control to these assholes in Austin who would rather we be dead or in jail. And we need people here on the ground in Texas fighting against that and trying to make a difference.
I guess, and the word of fighting against that is fighting against anti-gay bullshit as simple as just being a gay trombonist, living in Texas, or is it being a gay trombonist, living in Texas, who is also maybe going to your state senator and being like, hey, just make us equal, stop fucking with us. I don't know.
It's all of those things. It's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I previously served as the president of the Houston LGBTQ political caucus. I was in the trenches. I was fighting the good fight on the ground. But, a lot of times it is as simple as existing and living your authentic life. Me just being at work and living my life and doing my day-to-day thing and just people talking about what they did for the weekend and me just making an offhand remark about, oh yeah, my husband and I went to Galveston to the beach. It can be as simple as being there, just being present and living your authentic life. Not everybody has to go to Austin and testify in front of the legislature or join a protest or lobby their legislators to make a difference. A lot of people make a difference just in their own families by living authentically. There are a lot of folks who have changed their minds about LGBTQ people because a friend or a family member came out and lived their authentic life in front of them and said, hey, I'm here. I'm that same person that you've always known. I'm
Yeah.
just living my life, trying to take care of my family and make a living and pay the rent.
Just like you are.
Right. Sometimes that's all it takes, is just to be visible, be yourself, and not be afraid of that. But that's a complicated thing for everybody. It's a very, very personal thing, what people are willing to do, what they're comfortable with, and where their sphere of influence is. I mean, my experience in the fourth largest city in Houston is a lot different than, say, somebody who's living in San Angelo in West Texas, a town of about 100,000 people that's in the middle of nowhere and 5 hours from the nearest big city. Those are two completely different experiences that people live. And so what works for somebody in San Angelo isn't going to be the same as what works for me here in Houston.
I think people often forget that even when it comes to politics, that people's willingness to change their minds about what they think is true based on what Fox News said to be, oh, well, I didn't think of that.
A lot of people who have changed their minds on issues related to the LGBTQ community have been influenced by somebody in their life who was open about their orientation or their gender identity and expression. Yeah. It takes people in their lives really to make a difference. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are people I've known who were like vehemently anti-gay, and it was, religious grounds and all those things. And I understood where they were coming from, particularly at Texas A&M. But, a lot of those folks that were like, hey, I want to try to understand this better. And so we were able to have conversations about, I talked earlier about how I knew when I was 5 years old. Some of these folks thought, oh, I just woke up one day and said, what'd be really neat? I'll just decide that I'm gay today. And, they realized it's not like that. And they didn't realize how tough things can be. I mean, I can tell you that you ask any gay person, any gay man, they'll probably tell you that they have been called a faggot from a moving vehicle. And when I tell people that I've had that experience, they're horrified. Even if they don't necessarily agree with LGBT issues or where we're at, they're like, well, that's just wrong. And I'm like, well, don't you see how these attitudes foster that kind of behavior? And they're all connected. And, people, the wheels start turning and they're like, oh, I understand it better now. And people change their minds when they understand the experience of the people who are close to them.
I wonder if it's as simple as like, well, people aren't supportive of this and that simply because that's not what they're surrounded by. I mean, and if they were surrounded by that, they might have been accepting of it much earlier. I wonder if a lot of these communities are so traditional that when something new comes up, they're just like, well, what the fuck is this bullshit?
Sexual orientation and gender identity have been a part of society as long as humans have existed in civilizations. In our society, the idea of being out and open and authentic about who you are is a relatively new concept. I mean, we don't have nearly enough time to get into the history of how the community has evolved since the nation's founding all the way through, to the larger strides in the 50s and 60s and through today. It all came down exactly what you said, is that somebody had somebody in their life who gave them that perspective that they didn't already have.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that people are always successful. I know far too many people who have zero contact with their families because their families were just not willing to open their minds and hearts to this person.
I remember this quote from a professor once I had in college is sometimes you have to make your own family.
Yeah, you do.
And back when I was in high school, I heard about LGBTQ, this and that. I did not know what it meant. I had no judgments against this or that. I knew that there was this one day of the school year where it was like, hey, to protest in support of LGBTQ people, you don't say a word. You just kind of sit there and be quiet. I went to school in Michigan. I got to know some more people who are gay and bi and trans and all that. As I learned more about the oppression they experienced, I started to feel for them even more. My understanding of, LGBTQ persons and people have just evolved over time, basically. Maybe onto more positive things to maybe wrap things up. What are the trombones you play, and what is your main instrument?
A couple of years ago decided I wanted to try to make the transition to bass as my primary. For a number of years, I had played a Holton TR-258, a big tenor with a 9-inch bell. It was a good bridge instrument to kind of get over into the bass parts. But now I'm playing a Getson 3062 AF. I have yellow and red bells for red bells over there. For different lit that I'm playing, I have a Shire's Q Alessi as my large bore tenor. I have the Shire's Q35 alto, and not behind me is a Busher Grand that was made in 1925. It's my little pea shooter. I keep it cased because it's silver, and you let it in the air for about 2 seconds and it tarnishes, and it's a lot of maintenance. But those are the four horns that I have. I'm doing a lot of tenor playing right now. The orchestras that I play tenor. I'm on second in both of those. I play second as a core player in the Conroe Symphony Orchestra, and I'm subbing on second in the Fort Bend Symphony Orchestra. Last concert I played bass as a sub in that orchestra. I like to say that I'm fully entrenched in being a doubler at this point. So when I do my recital in the spring of next year, I'm planning to play all three horns to fully embrace that as part of my musical career. That I'm not going to just pigeonhole myself onto one of the horns, and just do as much as I can, as often as I can, to just play.
The more tools in your belt, the more work you can do. Did you ever play for the San Antonio Symphony?
No, and that is a tragedy.
For those of you who don't know, the San Antonio Symphony was dissolved. Efforts are currently being made to revive it. Do you know anyone who played in that orchestra?
Yeah, I know Elon Morgenstern, who played bass trombone for the San Antonio Symphony for a while.
And now San Antonio doesn't have an orchestra anymore.
It's just sad. It really is absolutely sad. Hopefully that fight's not over yet. There's some whole things about the contract and what they could and couldn't do, but I don't know all the ins and outs of the legalities of that, but hopefully that there's a positive outcome, whether that's just the orchestra with a new board and a new focus, or if that's the musicians of the San Antonio Symphony reforming a new organization and rebuilding. If they've got to rebuild, they certainly will have my support and the support of a lot of musicians all over the country and around the world to get back to being, these musicians are all world class, but having a real organization that is a world class orchestra like they had before, it's a shame what happened.
Any big city that loses an orchestra is just bad news. No one's like, we lost an orchestra? Great! What else we got? Oh, beer, barbecue, horses, bullshit. I don't know. I've heard of other stories, like I think the Met Opera Orchestra went on strike or something like that because their board was like, we'll just outsource talent. Fort Wayne from Indiana, they also had this other strike. Brian Johnson wasn't part of that orchestra, and they also had this other thing, and fortunately that didn't dissolve. But then San Antonio just doesn't have an orchestra anymore.
At the end of the day, we want to make good music, and it doesn't matter who we are as long as we're making good music. For the people who had an issue with Sasha Ramiro coming out, she's one of the best trombonists in the country.
Yes.
So,
yes.
If you've got something to say, she can play you into the ground.
Yeah, she can kick your fucking ass. Maybe when it comes to learning to play the instrument really well, do you have any bits of advice for someone maybe learning the instrument, might have a good teacher, but might use maybe a bit of a alternate perspective on how to be better at trombone, or just maybe any instrument in general?
There's really two things that I wish I had known 30 plus years ago when I started playing.
Okay.
The first thing is be careful about listening to other trombonists.
Be careful about listening to other trombonists. That is a first.
Because there's so much out there that is produced. And what you're hearing in a lot of recordings is produced. It is like the best take out of 90 takes.
Yeah.
And, these are professionals who've been working a long, long, long time. They've got somebody at a board who's making them sound the best that they possibly can sound.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Everything is controlled and in a lot of cases manipulated.
Mixed.
So it's, if you're a 14-year-old trombonist like I was, listening to Christian Lindbergh saying, I'm just trash, then you're not going to be motivated to get better because you're comparing yourself to an impossible standard. Christian Lindbergh actually has a great YouTube channel that shows him practicing. And when Christian Lindbergh's blowing notes, it's refreshing because I blow notes all the time, and I see, these people that we really look up to are human, just like the rest of us. It's not like the album that he put out that's perfect in every sense of the word.
Juilliard Trombone Choir records the take for the all one first take. Up, great job, everyone.
Right.
Goodbye. Perfect playing. What else do I gotta say? Just go get a fucking job out there already. You know.
Right. And the second thing is be patient. We all want to be the best right now.
Yeah.
Every day I fight that. And so I'll go through the same things over and over and over again and seize those moments where you see that the work you're doing is paying off. I'll have, just an awful day in ensemble or in studio where I'm playing a bunch of stuff that's 3, 4, 5 ledger lines, and I'm playing that just solid for an hour, and it sucks. And I'm cracking notes, and it's hard. But then the next time I get in rehearsal, or the next time I'm playing something that gets up into that range, it's easier for me. And I'm like, hey, all this shit that I've been dealing with and been just killing myself over, it made a difference. And to just kind of be patient and think and find those little small victories to keep yourself motivated. I will tell you that in the 2 years that I have actually been taking lessons, I have come so much farther along as a trombonist than I ever thought I could. My range and my skills and abilities are better now than they were when I was actually working in industry in LA 25 years ago. I seize on that and I think, wow, I'm having a really good day. I'm playing in an orchestra now and I'm doing all these good things. And I look back at what I did to get there and I do that more. If somebody had told me those two things when I was 14, I think my life as a musician probably would have been a lot different.
You talk about the patience aspect. It kind of reminds me, actually, remember where your feet are. Remember where you are right now so that you can progress step by step, as opposed to wanting to be something you're just not.
It's certainly a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate you reaching out to me and being interested in my life and what I'm doing and what I've done and what I've been through.
Your husband's name is what now?
Brad.
And how's he doing? Do you guys have pets or?
Yeah, we have 2 beagles, Willow and CJ. Willow named for Willow Rosenberg from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and CJ as in CJ Craig from The West Wing.
I have no idea what that is, but congratulations. I love your dog. Thank you so much, Noel, for taking the time to chat with me. I'll definitely be checking up on you every once in a while because you are really something, honestly.
Well, thank you.
A true inspiration for a lot of people out there, really.
I appreciate that. It means a lot.
Including myself, honestly. I mean, I just love learning about new things. Noel, take care, and I hope you have a nice day, all right?
All right. Thanks, sir.